Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Now, we're going to do this first because I'm going to tweet it out later because that's what we do, right? Because we're in communications. So I am Kim McMahon. I am now with CNCF as of 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to talk about promoting your open source project, building online communities using social media and communications. And one thing, so I'm out there live tweeting, as many of us are. I did put the event hashtags out there so that I just want to tell you that if you're not using the event hashtag, I'm probably not seeing your tweet because there's so much conversation going on here at this event that myself and probably a lot of people who are doing some live tweeting and trying to communicate out to their audience, that's all they're looking at. So there's your one tip for today that you can definitely take back is make sure you're using the event hashtag. So who am I and why do you listen to me? You know, we have the obligatory slide. I've been doing marketing and communications for a long time, for a lot of tech companies. And I do want to point out that this is a practice. It's definitely not a science. And anybody who's in the communications, we try things, we watch our metrics, and we talk to each other, we try to learn more, and then we adjust our plans. So even though I've been doing this for a while, as a lot of us are, you know, we're always learning new things and how to better reach our audience. So Amanda Catone and I worked together on the code team at Dell, and we were sitting around one day and talking about why we have been so successful. Like, why did people know who code were? Why did people know Jonas and David, who are sitting in this room as well, from the code team? And we talked about that it's because we participated in the community. We were a member of the community, we shared community content, we went to events, and so we came up with this meme, with the Fight Club meme, apparently, and I haven't seen the movie, but the number one rule in open source marketing is that you have to participate in the community. And so I'm going to talk about some of the tactics that we used that you can also use just to help get noticed to yourself or your project or your company or whatever that is. And that starts out with the first thing, that starting with a goal, is that you kind of need to know why you're doing this. You know, I mean, I guess you can just go out there and start talking and communicating with just because you want to, and there's definitely people that do that. But if you can be a little more focused, like these guys looking for the ball, and understand why you're doing it, that's going to just help you target your communications. And there's a lot of things you can do. I just listed a couple up here. You could be trying to just grow the open source community in general because you love it. You could be trying to grow awareness for your project, for yourself, for your company, trying to show the community that you have expertise in a specific topic. You could be trying to communicate so that the foundation gets notice of your project and so that you can hopefully get more users on it, more GitHub stars, so that you can get accepted into the foundation. But the point of the goal is that if you do that, you're going to stay a little more focused. You're not going to start flying all over doing lots of different things. And the things you're going to do is impactful, and the one that we all sometimes like, although I'm not sure I should tell my bosses, but we actually want to work less. But the goal is that if you have a goal, you are going to be more focused, and it's going to be, you are going to actually work a little less at your communications. The other thing is know who you're talking to, and in the open source community, and in this community, it is the community, and there's all kinds of different people, technical, non-technical. We have introverts, extroverts, developers, just project funders. So there's all kinds of people. Now, I'm probably talking to most of them, but I also know, and if anybody follows me on Twitter, you also know that I don't really speak very technically. I'm not talking about the technical attributes of a project or why it was good or that. I may share if it's has gone up from an incubator or from a sandbox to an incubator, but I'm not going to talk about that, and my audience isn't going to expect me to. But I also know that my audience is technical because it's you guys, right? And that if I start talking marketing that you're probably going to stop listening to me. So I know that for me. So kind of have a feeling for who you're talking to. And if you are a technical person and you're talking about your project and you are sharing those technical details, if that's your audience, then just make sure that that's what you're sharing. Don't try to talk like me, because it won't work. And then the last thing in prepping for your communication is influencers and knowing who they are. Because this is open source and it's community, and engagement is really important. So you need to know who to follow, who to engage with in social media, whether it's Twitter or whether it's on blogs. Because that's how you're going to be sharing your content. And I'm going to get into here in a minute on like what type of content you should share. But how do you find those influencers? You can ask your team or ask the community, ask people who are they following on Twitter. I have a copy up here, just a screenshot from my Twitter on the list that I created. Do some snooping, go out there and look and see who I follow or who's on my list, or other people that influencers in the industry. We had a whole bunch of them speaking earlier this morning. So go out there and follow, take a look and see who they follow or who they have on their list. For here, follow this hashtags. I talked about the event hashtag a little earlier. So follow that event hashtag, and you're going to see, besides the bots, you can ignore the bots that are retweeting everything that's happening here on this hashtag, but you're going to see like the normal humans who are out here tweeting out content. And you're going to see, and if they're saying something interesting, put them on your list, follow them on Twitter. And when I find those people, I do follow them, but I also put people on a list because I just need to keep things organized. I follow a lot of people for reasons, to support them, but also when I want to find content to share, whether it's open source content or container content or KubeCon event, I'm going to go to one of my lists based on, what I'm in the mood to share or what I haven't shared lately. So these lists are all public. You can copy them, you can subscribe to them, but feel free to use them, and if that'll give you an idea of who you find as your influencers. And then, when you look at that, if there's somebody I'm missing, send me a note, DM me. My DMs are open. I would love to hear who you all find are influencers that maybe I've missed and didn't put on one of my lists. So when you're building a community, communicating about your open source project, lots and lots of tools out there that you can use. And I'm going to talk about a couple of them. I do want to point out that unless you got a really big marketing team or a lot of money, you're never going to do all of these things. Even the code team, not that we had a lot of people or a lot of money, but we had a big organization behind us, and we only did a handful of these. So I'm going to talk through some of these that you can do, and you may have some that are your favorites. And if those are your favorites, if you love blogging or doing webinars or videos, then those are the things that you should do and kind of put in your tool bag of content. But I am going to start with Twitter because I think it's the easiest thing to get started. And I was having a conversation with somebody, and I can't remember exactly who, somebody important, which is really even worse that I don't remember who they are. But what they confirmed that Twitter is that a lot of people follow Twitter in this industry. And I just kind of wondered because I do a lot of it, but he confirmed that is a way that they are definitely communicating. So I think if you're going to do anything, you can go ahead and start with Twitter. But then there's advice on like how you should share content. You have the rules of threes that you should do. A third of your content is community content, and a third of your content is your own, and a third is somebody else's. And the 411, which is really not a good one, is that for every 6 things you share, 4 times is something you wrote, which I don't agree with. But I kind of put up there what we settled on with the code team, and our goal was community. It was to promote the community and be a really good open source member. So 50% of what we did was engagement on Twitter. So I would find other people's content, share it out with a comment. Then another 25% of that was content that we found that somebody else wrote, somebody else's blogs. and then 25% of our original content, and nothing's exact, but we strive for that. For myself personally, I'm probably more in like the 60, 30, 10, does that add up? Yeah, because I don't produce a lot of my own original content, I should, but I don't. So, but the point is that engagement is always, in this community, engagement, for me, I thought engagement was really important, to be sharing things with other people, or sharing other people's things and showing that expertise that way. So when you're going to be hanging around on Twitter, consistency is probably the most important thing. And that doesn't mean you need to be there every day and tweeting 5 to 10 times a day or whatever somebody said in some article that you read. What I mean by consistency is, if you're going to be out there, try to go out there a couple times a week and do something, maybe a handful of times a month. But the point being is that if you follow me on Twitter, I'm going to look at your profile. And if you tweeted, 10 times during the show and then the last time you tweeted was in 2016, I'm not going to follow you, right? And I'm not going to follow what you have to say. So being out there consistently sharing something is going to tell me or other people that look to follow you that you have something to say at least every once in a while. And that's really important for a project. I've seen a lot of projects out there that people tweet only when they have a release. I mean, and it's tough to follow that. You're not showing your expertise that way. When I write content or when I work with whatever company I'm writing content, we lead with what I call the community. So we're leading with something else. So I can give an example. For example, I'm going to share something that Jonas and I did together. I'm going to start with, first off, that his presentation here talked about building online communities. And then I'm going to share his name, and then I'm going to say why I care. So the whole point is that I'm really trying to be selfless and promoting other people when doing that. And that's kind of like an open source practice. And now that you think about that, when you go out there and look at some of the tweets, there's some people that all they do is they talk about themselves, and you're going to really open up your eyes to that. I always do give credit to a source. Anytime I do a tweet, I try to do a handle. It's going to have them notice you. They're going to like it, and then you're going to get some more traction in the Twitter sphere here. Hashtags, I talked about the event hashtag, but then I'll use other hashtags, cloud native, because of where I'm working now. I will end up using that hashtag quite a bit. That's one of the things I look at for content, is I'll look at hashtags, because it helps me find content that's more relevant that I want to share out. For whatever reason, all tweets have an image. They just perform better. I didn't know that it turned into Facebook, but I guess it works. So really try to put an image. I do try to take a picture, use some sort of image. They really do, that's the ones they look at. And tweet with your own voice. Try not to tweet like a business. I'm not going to tweet and use marketing ease. I'm going to tweet using my own voice, because it's social media and it's personal. And put the interesting part of the content at the beginning of your tweet. So don't start with somebody's name. Start with why somebody should be looking at that. Because even though we now have 240 characters, our attention span is still probably way shorter than that. And monitor Twitter for engagement. And so the whole reason that we're out on social media is engagement. I actually had a friend tweet out. He was actually bragging. I'm just going to call it bragging. He was bragging about the number of people number of followers he has, and then how many people he followed. And he said, yeah, somebody DM'd me on Twitter and said, did you see my tweet or something I responded to? He says, I have 10,000 followers. I don't even, I have no idea, no way of seeing all that. And the whole thing about Twitter is engagement. So if somebody took the time to like my tweet or retweet it, or, I'm going to acknowledge that somehow. And because I think you all took the time to interact with me, I'm going to take the time to interact back with you. And you can do that by liking the tweet. I can quote retweet it right back out. I can schedule it, whatever it is I'm going to do. But you'll see that action with me when you engage with me on Twitter. And then for engagement, those lists I talk about, I'm going to look through those lists for things I can share from other people and check hashtags. So we'll move off Twitter, and I'm going to touch on a couple of these other content tools that you can use kind of lightly, and I can definitely go into more detail with any of you on this topic. I'm happy to talk about this, but let's talk a little bit about, I've kind of grouped these together. I know they're different formats, but they all tend to show your expertise or tell somebody something in a little more detail, right? So it showcases quote unquote technical. In my case, my blogs would be about marketing, maybe marketing and open source communications. So these are a great way to communicate more detail about a topic out to your audience. And so if you were going to add something after Twitter to help promote you, your project, your company, whatever, is start doing one of these formats. And I'm not talking about a 1,000-word blog every week. You guys can do shorter blogs, but just getting something out there that gives somebody something to read that goes a little more detail into what you're trying to communicate. That is the next good thing to do. The important thing is have your subject matter experts write it. I'm not going to write a technical blog. I don't know the technology. It wouldn't come off authentic. But our subject matter experts would write the blogs. For example, David would write the blogs on Prometheus and other technical topics, and I would work with him on that. But he always wrote those blogs. I'm going to skip the metrics because we'll get into that in a little bit. Events. So event is a good thing in your tool bag. When you do an event, you don't have to have a booth. You don't have to do what a lot of these, you can have a booth. You can sponsor an event. You can throw a party, but you don't have to do those things. You can do things like submit a CFP and get to stand up here and wonder why you're doing that when you could be sitting back there. Or you can attend sessions and live tweet. There's a lot of networking opportunities, but that's coming back to being present in the community and getting to know people. So I was at the Empower Her last night, and I'm like, oh, I hate these things. I'm such an introvert. And of course, then everybody argues with me about you not being an introvert, but I force myself to go to those things and meet new people, and I need to force myself to do the coffee breaks instead of hiding in a room and pretending to work. But the point is that that's going to help get noticed for whatever you're trying to do, give you an opportunity to talk about your project, your company, whatever it is that you're trying to promote. So Slack. So thank you, Jonas, and thank you for the call out earlier. So I wanted to include Slack in here because I do think that this is a good communication tool for helping build online awareness. And I do believe, Caitlin, we have a Slack channel for all of our projects, all the CNCF projects. I'm still learning because I'm new, but so it's a good tool to use for communicating a one-to-many. And I asked Jonas for best practices, so I'm going to go over a couple of them. And there's his Twitter handle there, so you can get a hold of him if you want or nab him on the way out. So I asked him for a couple best practices. He says you got to automate whatever you can. So, for example, automate the sign-in process, and because Code Community grew to over 6,000 members, and it's just not something you could monitor on your own. So he also talked about keeping it public. So trying to limit the amount of private conversations, or limiting the ability for people to create channels to have private conversations. It's open source. We want to be open and in the community. And as a manager, if people created private channels, he could not monitor them and make sure that that was keeping with the spirit of why that Slack channel existed. And then the third thing he did is be present and proactive. So there's questions on your Slack channel. So you actually You got to go out there and you have to look at that. You don't want to leave those unanswered, but you also don't want to be answering them all. So one of the tactics that Jonas told me that he did is if a question came in, he would look for somebody else in the community and tag them to answer it. So that's really just getting more of the engagement in the community. So metrics, you don't, you're going to have to do it at some point. And Jonas talked about it in his presentation earlier, which reminded me how painful it was when I got to the code team and we had absolutely no metrics. So it was going back and researching and creating this stuff from scratch. Now, you don't have to, you are going to have to do it at some point. You're going to want to monitor whether any of your activities are actually making an impact. And with Twitter, I have a whole spreadsheet. I think after Open Source Leadership Summit, some people wanted it. I'm happy to share my metrics spreadsheet with you. But I just once a month go out there and grab my Twitter stats and throw them in there, and it ends up building out these nifty little charts for engagement. And it also gets you looking at the different communications that I did or that I did for whatever company I'm working with, to see if I'm getting engagement. What kind of tweets am I getting engagement from? What time of day am I getting engagement? So that I could maybe adjust the plan I had. Now, and with blogs, I did track how many times people visited it, but more importantly, how long they spent on the page. And I didn't track bounce rates because we weren't trying to drive people. We were not a product. We were an open source project. We're not trying to drive people out to a product page. But I did track how long people stayed on the page. Did they stay there for 30 seconds or 3 minutes? Obviously 30 seconds, they probably didn't read it. So that would tell me what kind of blogs resonated with our audience. I would, on the newsletter, open and click-through rates, and all of these, I tracked our topics. That's that bottom chart. What kind of topics are people interested in? What were they reading? Because that would give me a guide as to what kind of content to continue producing. Or if they were reading something that had nothing to do with what we were trying to communicate, then maybe we needed to do a little better job on our message and why we actually existed. So in summary, good, I'm going to kind of finish early a little bit here, but in summary, set your goals. We talked about setting some goals, know why you were doing this. Know your resources. I didn't talk about that, but have a feel for how much time you have, how much time you have from a teammate. If you have only one engineer and you're pushing a product out, every month, which I know it's like a crazy time frame, but they don't have time to write. So don't try to say let's do a monthly or a weekly blog. So gauge your resources and what you actually can do when you're building out what kind of communications you want to do. Know who you're talking to, kind of get a feel for who you're talking to so you can tailor your content for that level of technical in your content. I talked about the different tools and metrics that you do actually got to kind of look at them at some point. And with that, I did actually plan it this way. I wanted to leave some time for questions. And that's Cole, the Labrador. He's really wild. Really wild. I'll take any tips on that too. That's his head after he takes his ball, throws it in the air, drops it in the snow, and then digs his head in the snow to dig it out. I don't get it. So anyway, any questions now that we're done talking dogs? Maybe not. Talking dogs. Questions?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we're currently working with, we haven't worked that much with open source at where I work.
Uh-huh.
We're working with King, make Candy Crush and all these games. So we're currently working with trying to start like a tech blog and be more active in Twitter and contributing to open source project from the get-go instead of only contributing patches whenever we need them. So how would you suggest we go with building a community when we don't have any at all to start with and we have no products on our own?
Okay, so the question is how do you go about building a community when you don't have any products of your own? So and you don't have the community yet. So I'm going to jump into your expertise so you're going to build a community around, there's probably some software language that you're using.
Sure.
Right. You're in open source and you're here, so maybe you're also using containers and Kubernetes. So you're going to talk about your expertise in those areas. And then, so you could do that in a blog. You could say, we had to solve a problem of some sort of scaling problem, and we did it with Kubernetes. And then you would go to Twitter, and then you would use hashtags like Kubernetes, or you could tag Kubernetes Twitter handle, for example, and tweet that out. So, but I do need to back up. You probably need to build your followers a little bit. So that takes it takes a while. And how you do is you go out there and you follow people in the industry. You find from your influencers, follow them. They're not always going to follow you back. You find content that is relevant to the kind of the kind of coding that you're doing. Articles on Kubernetes and articles on open source, and you're going to share that and tag those people, and it's going to help get you noticed. People will start following you, and unfortunately, it probably takes a good 3 to 6 months to get that sort of following going on, and get that following from people and get that traction, and then it tends to grow as long as you stay consistent. That help?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So now you're doing it for the cloud native.
Yes.
Right? But you said you also did it for private companies.
Yes.
Like communication on that. Like, what's the biggest difference you think?
Yeah, so between open source and private companies?
Exactly, like
Yeah. Well, with commercial companies, you were driving them to a call to action. I was driving them to a website. I was driving them to a buy page. I was driving them to sign up for a hackathon, which wouldn't be altogether different from what we would be doing here. It's like we could drive people that. But so for-profit companies, everything was a call to action. You know, we were metriced on that. So I took that, and our call to action would be driving people to come see our team's presentations at events. It would be driving to, signing up for the event, you know, supporting CNCF and Cloud Foundry and the other foundations that we were part of, supporting them and driving people to their event. So the difference is that I don't have metrics to track. I couldn't prove that I drove any attendance there. But with a private company, I could show metrics in terms of driving traffic to a web page. But some of the techniques are similar. Yeah?
Like the voice you use.
I'm sorry?
The voice you use towards the
I
same kind of voice or message? Or
I can't hear you. I'm so sorry.
do you use the same tone of voice in your message?
Do I use the same tone of voice? Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry. I know. No, I don't think so. When I came over to code, and so I moved from high performance computing, really technical, trying to drive an action, like getting people to a website or getting them to sign up for a newsletter, to the code team where our tone of voice was more playful, engaging, we're your best friend kind of thing. But that tone of voice can be based on you or your company. I personally, so even when I worked for-profit companies, we may be a little more serious, but I always put a lot of fun in it because that's what I think is important. I luckily didn't work for somebody that wanted things to be very serious in tone of voice. But so it's going to depend on the branding of you, like how you want to be presenting yourself would be your branding, how the companies, how they want to present themselves. Did that? Yeah. Yes.
You've got two Twitter handles to handle.
Yeah?
Company handle and your own personal one.
Yep.
How do you split the communication here? How do you not indulge too much on the personal or the business side of it? If you change jobs, for example, like you did.
Yeah.
Will you use the personal handle?
So great question. So what do you do when you have two Twitter handles, and how do you balance your communications between those? So my Twitter handle it's been that way since I joined. So I never had a company Twitter handle. I never had Kim at, wherever. is if I did, you can actually change your Twitter handle now. I haven't had to do that, but you can actually change it. So if you have a Twitter handle that is, was Kim at Dell.com, I could change that when we leave, for example. So I manage the code and myself, Twitter handle, and so I'm kind of a spreadsheet sort of girl, and I had a spreadsheet that I'm out there looking at content. I'm reading my Google News feeds. I'm looking at Twitter content. When I find something to share, I decide whether I'm going to share it from the code team or myself or both. And it goes into the spreadsheet. And then I actually scheduled it right there so that I wasn't tweeting out something from my handle at the same exact time I was tweeting out from the code team. Or I would set it up to go from the code team, and then I would retweet it from my handle. So I just I found something and decided whether it went to mine. Yes?
Are there any tools?
My spreadsheet, I've created a template of that. I'm happy to share it with you.
Are there any tools to easily handle the two handles?
Oh, like a Hootsuite? Yeah, so with Dell, I use Sprinkler for their stuff. You can use a Hootsuite. I've gotten a lot of really good feedback on Buffer. I personally don't use it just because I'm too lazy to change tools. And then you can use TweetDeck, which I think is pretty buggy, actually. So I would look at a Hootsuite or a Buffer for you personally if you have Hootsuite. Yeah, Hootsuite or Buffer. If you have corporate money behind you, I've heard really good things. I want to say it's Sprout Social, but anybody out there who's using some corporate tools? Anybody have a social media scheduling tool that they love? Buffer? You said Buffer. We got another vote for Buffer. We got another vote for Buffer. Yeah. Maybe I just need to quit being lazy and switch. Any other tools that people found that they use and love?
Sprout Social is great.
Yeah, Sprout. Is that what we're using? Okay, yeah, and I've heard really good things. Now, Sprout Social would be more, it's expensive. It's more of a corporate tool. I mean, where Buffer and Hootsuite are more for smaller businesses, smaller projects. I mean, they're priced that way. Thank you. Any others? Anyone vote on their favorite tool? Yeah. No, you have a different question.
Would you say it's more important to build a business brand or a personal brand if you're kind of just getting started?
Is it more important to build personal brand or business brand? Both. You're going to have to, right? Because so if you got a project, somebody's working on it, right? And so people work on projects. So I believe that in open source we want to personalize things a little bit, and so we're going to want to build out the people behind the projects. And we were doing that at the code team as well. We would identify 2 for each half of the year because I refused to do any more. David was my project. But where we would try to build out his brand. And but then when I did tweets for something on a project, on a blog, I always tagged our person as well. So you got to kind of balance both. I probably, we can talk specifically about your project. I'm leaning towards it. I'd probably put a little more emphasis on the project than the person, but you can't leave the people out. I'm getting a nod. Would you agree, Jonas? In building your communities? Yeah. Anything? Oh my God, great questions, guys. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, so my DMs are open. There's my Twitter again. My DMs are open. I'm happy to talk with anybody. We can, if we don't have time while we're here, I'm happy to schedule a call. And when we all get back, if you want to talk specifically, show me what you've done. Show me what you're doing. We can talk through advice on what you can do. And I did that after Open Source Leadership Summit and stay in contact with a couple people. And we take a look at, they try different things. We take a look at the metrics. And so happy to do it if anybody wants to talk. Thank you.